Let's go ahead and take a look at Kathy's speech arguing that online education will never replace traditional universities. And this is the improved version, the refined version. But let's go ahead and take a look at that now.
Online education is a novel and upcoming idea, and I certainly am an advocate for it. I believe that it's an opportunity for educational outreach, and it's also a resource for subjects and interests that people may not have access to. However, I do agree that online education will never replace traditional universities. And I believe this for two main reasons. Firstly, because as good as online education is, it simply can't replicate a mentoring relationship that traditional education can. Not only this, but online education also doesn't have the certification power of brick and mortar institutions. But firstly, I want to go into a little bit more about this idea of a mentoring relationship. And what I mean by this is a student-teacher interaction that occurs outside of the classroom, where a student is guided towards new experiences and is perhaps offered advice in pursuit of future goals. Now, this often happens in face-to-face settings, and it can make a huge difference in educational outcomes. This is something that I can personally attest to. While I was taking organic chemistry in my undergraduate career, I had an excellent mentoring relationship with my professor. Not only did he teach me the concepts well in class, but he also sat down with me outside of class, and at a time where I was unsure of my career paths, he helped me to map out my career goals and also provided me more insight into options that I hadn't considered beforehand. And this ultimately played an incredibly huge role in where I am today and the career path that I chose to take. And so, in support of mentoring relationships, there are numerous studies that show that these relationships have highly beneficial impacts on graduation rates, completion rates, and just overall educational quality. And so, mentorship with someone who knows you and someone who has high expectations of you can often drive you further to success. And this is something that online education just can't replicate compared to traditional universities because there simply isn't enough face to face interaction. Not only this, but online education also doesn't offer the certification power of a brick and mortar institution. So students often go to universities for education, but aside from that, they also go to universities for the certification to show that they've earned their education and earned their degree. Now, this simply doesn't exist in online education because it's more difficult to assess for understanding, and because there's a lack of social grooming in this aspect of certification of education. Now, when it comes to assessment of understanding, this often means exams. Now, in a traditional university where you have in-person classes, you can have proctors and teachers administer exams and ensure that the grade a student gets is what he or she truly deserves. And so they can be certified for their achievements in a class. However, in online education, while you can offer a mode of assessment, you simply can't be sure that the person on the other side of the screen is taking an exam faithfully and taking it with integrity. And so, certification in regards to assessment of understanding simply may be a little bit more suspect in online education. What you're also not getting in terms of certification in online education is socialization. In traditional universities, you have young adults and students that commingle with each other, and this fosters growth and expansion of interests among all students. And this is something that can't occur in online education because it's very one-sided and singular. So when you sign up to take a class, you don't often get that student-to-student interaction that traditional universities offer. And so in terms of certifications, you're simply lacking a little bit more in socialization. So while I am a huge advocate for online education, I don't believe that it's a threat to traditional universities. Uh, this is because online education simply can't replicate mentoring relationships that traditional universities offer because they don't have that face-to-face interaction. And aside from this, online education also lacks the certification power of traditional universities because there's a lack of assessment and understanding and a lack of social grooming. So while online education is certainly up and coming, I do believe that traditional universities are here to stay.
That was much improved over the former one. And again, I asked her to manipulate these variables so we could have a way of understanding this feedback form. But that one just is a very, very strong speech. It's doing what I want you to be doing in this impromptu assignment. So let's go ahead and move to the flow. So if I look at this introduction, very clear. I've got a clear preview statement. I know where we are. I know where we're going. So our two main points are online, let's see, I wrote them down on here too. As good as online education is, it can't replicate a mentoring relationship, and online education doesn't have the certification power that traditional universities do. Okay, so I've got good claims here, and I've got discrete claims, and I know what they are. Then we get into her 1A. And of course, what's interesting is in the flawed version, she's using the same basic evidence as she's using in this version, but it just has so much more meaning and power and function if it's attached to a claim, if it's not just floating evidence and we don't know where it's running. So with this, we've got online education. She once again talks about that organic chemistry professor. And I really like that example. The only thing I would add, though, is I think she needs to discuss a little bit more tangibly why that exact type of mentoring relationship couldn't occur online. So once again, I get a real good sense of mentoring, but I don't know why the online version would not work. Then she's got some stuff about mentoring and educational outcomes. I would say that 1B probably needs a little bit more detail. There is some vague discussion of this. There is research to support that. She doesn't talk about it, nor does she have to, but we just sort of had a lot of talk around the claim and not sort of the concreteness of a good example, especially not like what she had in her 1A. Let's slot down to point 2. Online education doesn't have the certification power. Online education traditional universities have better means of assessment, and that that 2A was a pretty good comparative measure. Because once again, she's saying, here's what happens in assessment for traditional universities, and here's how that isn't as good in online settings. So that one example allows her to really drive forward not only the claim, but the larger thesis as well. So I think that 2A was probably her strongest point. And then we get down to her 2B, and kind of like her 1B, that social grooming point is good. It makes sense to me, but it probably needs a little bit more tangible evidence. Delivery is just much better here. There's certainly more energy as well. So if we go to the feedback form, invention, the main points, I would say those are excellent. Those make sense to me. Those are strong. The support, I'm going to go ahead and put it in excellent, although I could certainly understand good, probably somewhere between those two. The 1A and 2A are really strong. The 1B and 2B are good, but not outstanding. So, I'd be more generous in that regard, so I'd position this in the excellent category. Arrangement, excellent. I know exactly where she is at each and every point, and delivery, excellent. So that's a really good model speech of how you can sort of commit to this and perform this. Once again, we're doing these speeches as skill-building activities. What I want you to be able to do, what I want Kathy to be able to do with these skills is then take them into other scenarios. But being able to do this in this type of format allows you to refine those skills so that you can then take them out into the world.